Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Baller Nation. This is the Off the Dome podcast. How are y'all doing today? We had a great night of basketball last night. We had Jamal Murray putting up 50 points, Anthony Edwards with the dunk of the year, and a candidate for dunk of the decade, an early candidate, obviously, for dunk of the decade. Ridiculous poster. Joel Embiid putting up 50 points in a remarkable game. Nikola Vucevic went off. Jokic went off. We had a great night of basketball last night. We've had a great week as well. I haven't recorded a podcast in a minute now. It's been about a week, honestly. We've got a little bit to talk about. Draymond Green, his rant that went viral. That was about 5 days ago, but I would like to mention and touch on that and talk a little bit about Draymond Green as a player, because he's honestly spectacular. AllStar Starters came out for both the East and the Western Conference. I'm gonna touch on the Most Improved Player of the Year award so far. All the hype normally goes to the MVP, Defensive Player of the Year. I think Most Improved Player of the Year award race this year is a little bit different than in years past. I will be talking a bit about the MVP, touch on that, and then top performers from last night. Jamal Murray, a historic game, easily the best game, the best individual performance we've seen this year so far, and probably of the past. Off the top of my head, I can't think of a performance better than that in the past few years. James Harden, of course, had a 60-point triple-double. There have been some other ones. LeBron with 50 points in the finals. But Jamal Murray was ridiculous last night. Simply ridiculous. But we're going to start with the All-Star Starters that came out. Honestly, going into the voting, there wasn't a lot of debate to be had. The only real debate was for the final guard position in both the East and the Western Conference. It felt like going into it, Bradley Beal had that one. He was a lock to be a starter, and Steph Curry as well, locked to be a starter in the West. And for me, it was tough picking between Damian Lillard and Luka Doncic. Luka eventually got in. I think Dame got robbed. When the voting first opened, it was a bit more controversial. But at this current, where we were sitting right now in the NBA season, Damian Lillard, I think, deserves that starting spot 100% over Luka Doncic. And out east, it was Bradley Beal who got the starting spot, and Kyrie Irving as well was there. And it was tough. Harden's had a great year. Jaylen Brown's had a great year. But I think the correct two got put in the Eastern Conference. So yeah, in the West, it was Luka, Steph, Kawhi, Nikola Jokic, and LeBron James was named the captain. He got the most votes. The front court's easy. Give LeBron James a captaincy. I don't really care. He obviously has got the biggest fan base in the NBA, and it's well deserved as well. He's been having a great year. Nikola Jokic, of course, he's having probably one of the best seasons a big man has ever had offensively in history. When you look at modern day NBA, since Wilt Chamberlain retired, I don't know if there's been so far what he's been doing on the efficiency that he's been doing it at. When Nikola Jokic, his season is one of the greatest offensive seasons by a big man of all time. It's up there with some of Wilt Chamberlain's, some of Shaquille O'Neal's. This is historic. And as far as passing the basketball goes as well, that's the thing with Nikola Jokic. He's not just grabbing boards. He's not just hitting big shots. He's not just scoring a lot of points. He is making great plays. He's a true playmaker. And Steph Curry and Luka Doncic got the guard positions. I agree with that. Steph Curry has to be in there. What he's been doing with the Golden State Warriors this year is quite impressive. And Luka Doncic, I already mentioned that I think Damian Lillard should have gotten that spot. And honestly, I could see why Luka's getting it. He's putting up ridiculous numbers so far this year. This guy, 29 points per game, 9.4 assists per game, 8.6 rebounds per game is simply ridiculous. That's amazing. Steph Curry putting up 30 points a game, 6 assists, 5.4 boards a game. Both those guys have been putting up great numbers, but I think Damian Lillard should have got the nod ahead of Luka Doncic because of how good his team is doing in the Western Conference. This team just came off I think it was a 6-game win streak, or no, they're currently on a 6-game win streak right now. Fourth in the Western Conference, two and a half games behind the Clippers for the 3 seed. But the most impressive thing here is that CJ McCollum's been out for about a month and a half, and so Nurkic has barely played this year. And this team, Damian Lillard, really he's obviously the only All-Star on this team. This team is somehow fourth in the NBA or fourth in the Western Conference right now. 64% win percentage. They have the fifth best record in the league, and it's just Damian Lillard. I expected this out of Portland if they had CJ McCollum, if they had if they had Nurkic, but they don't. It's literally just Dame, and if they've had some great. Gary Trent's had some great performances. Obviously, they've got more guys than just those three, but in this current NBA, it seems like you need stars to win. Portland had three. I think they had three. I think top 50 players. I think CJ McCollum's extremely underrated. I had CJ McCollum as probably a top 3 shooting guard in the NBA. That's including Klay Thompson when he's healthy. That's including Bradley Beal and of course James Harden. I think he's better than one of those guys, and he's out. But the Blazers are still. I mean, I think that's why I would put Damian Lillard ahead of Luka Doncic. Of course, Luka's team currently 10th in the West with a losing record. But yeah, I mean, honestly, either way, both have been having great seasons. Out in the East, Bradley Beal and Kyrie Irving making the AllStar starters for guards. Kyrie Irving, I think, is well deserved. I don't think we should. I was asked earlier if this was Kyrie Irving's best season, if this is the peak of Kyrie Irving, and it's got to be. I think right now we're watching a better Kyrie Irving than we saw in Cleveland. Right now we're watching obviously a more experienced player than we saw in Cleveland, and a guy who's been willing to work with his teammates a lot more than I guess you could say in Cleveland. Of course, the reason he left Cleveland was to become the top dog, and he went to Boston to become that. That didn't work out. He went to Brooklyn, and we all clowned him for being like, yo, now you're the third dog. But you look at this season, and Kevin Durant hasn't played a lot. And when James Harden was there, Harden's more than happy of sitting back and saying, hey, Kyrie, you're putting up 28 points a game pretty much right now. You're having a great season. You go take us to victory. And Kyrie, I think you can make a case he's been the top dog in Brooklyn this year. Even though Kevin Durant obviously is on that team, KD hasn't been playing a lot. Harden's been chilling. He's like, yo, Kyrie, you're balling out. I'm going to let you do it. So I got nothing but respect for Kyrie Irving so far this year. I mean, I've got nothing bad to say against him. Bradley Beal, I agree with him being a starter. I think he's overrated because, points per game obviously isn't everything. He's not a very good defensive player, and of course his team is shit. But that has a lot to do with COVID and all that stuff. Russell Westbrook hasn't panned out very well. But yeah, I'm gonna give it to Bradley Beal. I would like to mention though James Harden, I would like to mention James Harden. This guy's I think we've forgotten how good James Harden is. I think when he won his MVP in 2018, and in 2019 he was putting up 36 points per game. Last year he still led the league in scoring. It was like 35 points a game, some shit like that, like 34. And this year, I mean, he's down about 20, 22, 23. I'm going to bring that up right now. But James Harden, we're forgetting how good this man is. And I think we all got a wake-up call the other night when there was no Kyrie Irving. There was no Kevin Durant on the Brooklyn Nets the other night. He's putting up 24 points a game right now, which is still quite a bit considering. I mean, it's a lot anyway, but the fact that he's got two of the other greatest players in the world right now. But I think we all got a wake-up call against the Phoenix Suns. The Phoenix Suns were on a 6 or 7 game win streak the other night, and on come the Brooklyn Nets, who don't have Kyrie, who don't have Kevin Durant, and we kind of clown them for saying, yo, you guys got 3 players, and after that you got Joe Harris and just shit. And James Harden, his team was down by about, it was 15 at one point in the fourth quarter, but James Harden gave us all a big wake-up call against the Phoenix Suns, especially in the fourth quarter. He reminded us of the player that he really is. He reminded us that, hey, he's not scoring a lot of points, but that's his choice. He's choosing to score less. He's choosing to play a lesser role. His stats aren't as good as they were when he was winning MVPs, but he's just as good as he was back when he was winning the MVP award. Back when he was in Houston, putting up 60, 50, 40 points every other night. He's the same player. He's just as good as he's ever been. Probably even better. But he's leading the NBA in assists per game right now. I mean, he's a walking triple-double while he's been in Brooklyn. He's literally been a walking triple-double. He's putting up 7 rebounds a game right now, or approximately 7. I have nothing but respect for James Harden. I have always had respect for James Harden. But I think we have to remember that this is the same James Harden who could give us 30, 40, 50 points every fucking night. There was not a night off when Harden wasn't giving us 35, 40, 50 points. It's the same guy. And when we saw him against the Phoenix Suns without KD, without Kyrie, and he gave us 38 points, hit a big dagger against the Suns, who had won 6 or 7 straight games, who were a 4th seed in the Western Conference, and Harden carried his team through there, and he showed us all that, hey, I might be putting up 24 points a game right now, but that's my choice. If I wanted to, I could give you 35 a game. If I wanted to, I could be leading the MVP award race right now. If I wanted to. But this guy, he's choosing to take a back seat. He's the third wheel on the Brooklyn Nets right now. And that's his choice. He's saying, you know, Kevin Durant, you've won championships before. I'm going to let you have it. Kyrie, you've won championships before. I'm going to let you have it. And I don't think a lot of people thought Harden was going to be able to do that. And he's proven a lot of people wrong. And I hope he continues doing that. I hope he continues being the third wheel. Because like he was in OKC, I think he's going to be even more clutch this year. He's going to play a big role for the Brooklyn Nets down the stretch. And a lot of people forget that back in OKC, Harden was looked at not as a playoff choker. He was looked at as a clutch guy. He was a clutch shooter back in OKC, back when he was a third wheel with KD and Russell Westbrook. And this year we're seeing it again. James Harden, nothing but respect. In the front court in the Eastern Conference, extremely easy. Kevin Durant was a captain, well-deserved. Giannis Antetokounmpo, Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid leading the MVP race in my books and in pretty much everyone else's books who aren't Lakers fans. And Giannis Antetokounmpo, who's having a really underrated season. You look at Giannis's numbers, and especially as of late, he's been coming on as of late, but he's giving you MVP-type numbers. He really is. 28 a night, 11.7 boards per game, 6 assists per game. An amazing defensive player all around. He's giving us these MVP-type numbers, but the thing is that there have been so many other great players so far this year, and we're going to be getting into that a little bit later. I would like to shout out quickly Donovan Mitchell. Donovan Mitchell he's turning into a clutch maestro, and if there is time later in this podcast, I would like to discuss that comparison between the Atlanta Hawks of 2015, 2016, and the current Utah Jazz. They're not the same. That Hawks team, they don't compare at all to this Utah Jazz team. If there's time, I might talk about that, or I might talk about that in a future episode, because I need to get my 2 cents in on that, because those comparisons, ridiculous, simply ridiculous. So that's the All-Star voting. MVP voting so far. I'd like to touch on this a little bit before we get into the Sixth Man of the Year award, or no, not the Sixth Man of the Year, the most improved player. MVP voting, it's the biggest award for a reason. And it's always covered in narratives. And in years past, narratives haven't, in years past, it hasn't been narrative-based voting. I think the correct winner won it pretty much every single year in the past few years, other than when Giannis won it his first time. I think that should have been Harden. Or Harden should have won back-to-back. I think that was Giannis's first MVP. But I think that this year, it's looking like LeBron's leading the way according to the NBA, which is simply, if you watch games, you know it shouldn't be the case. And the thing is, LeBron, here's the thing with the MVP. There's so much talent in the NBA right now. LeBron James, Steph Curry, Nikola Jokic, and Damian Lillard are all having MVP caliber seasons. They're all having seasons where you look at it and it's like, shit, they could win the MVP. With the way they're playing, easily. They're all having MVP type seasons. But from an unbiased fan point of view, Nikola Jokic has to be the MVP. Joel Embiid has to be the MVP. LeBron James, Steph Curry, Nikola Jokic, Damian Lillard are all having MVP type seasons, but to the unbiased fan, Joel Embiid has to be MVP. There's no way around it. Amazing stats, check. His team first in the East, check. And an amazing defensive player, yup. Amazing offensive player, yup. Does his team play better with him than without him? Yup. His team looks lost without him. Ben Simmons can't lead that team. Joel Embiid, for the first time in his career, he's actually been consistent. He's actually been able to stay a little bit healthy. He's been able to not get too caught up in his mentals. The Philadelphia 76ers are having an amazing year. Remember, 4 or 5 years ago, the 76ers were clowned. They were the Cleveland Browns of the NBA. And Joel Embiid trusted the process. And look at him now. leading the way in pretty much everyone's opinion, other than Bronzesexuals and Lakers fans' opinion, in the MVP award race. The age has nothing to do with MVP. If you want to say LeBron James is an MVP candidate, I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. And he has a chance, I think, over the next stretch of games, over the next few weeks, now that Anthony Davis is out, he's got a chance to take a stranglehold in the MVP. If he can get some wins together and if he can ball out in those wins, he should be the leader. But right now, no way. And I think recently we've seen it. Taking a double OT by the Pistons. Taking OT twice, back-to-back by the OKC Thunder. You get your brains blown out by the Denver Nuggets, and then you get railed by the Brooklyn Nets without KD, and you had all that, and that's just LeBron. There's no AD there. And I don't know how he's still leading it. I don't get it. I don't understand it. I think, again, there are 4 or 5 guys right now who are balling out. I think that if Damian Lillard and the Portland Trailblazers were in the Eastern Conference with the record they currently have, and with the few healthy players they currently have, of course it's just Dame, CJ's not there, Nurkic isn't there, and there are still top 4 seed in the West. I think he should be up there in the MVP conversation. Obviously, Steph Curry should be up there in the MVP conversation. Nikola Jokic, I've mentioned, one of the greatest seasons a big man's ever had offensively. I think he should be in the MVP conversation. And LeBron James as well. I mean, consistency is key here, and LeBron's proven that he can be as consistent as ever. Kevin Durant, I think, would be in the MVP conversation if he had continued playing and if he wasn't hurt. But I understand he's kind of doing the Kawhi Leonard load managing type of thing when Kawhi was trying to recover from his injury. Speaking of Kawhi Leonard, he's having an MVP type of year as well, or maybe not an MVP winning type of year, but he should be in the conversation. He's having a great year. And if the Utah Jazz, the 1 seed in the West, Donovan Mitchell, having a terrific year. He is as clutch as fuck. He is simply ridiculous. I love Donovan Mitchell. He is simply sensational. That's the MVP. Now on to the most improved player of the year. And I think this one has a little bit of controversy to it, the most improved player, because the person who I think deserves it the most at this current point in the year isn't the popular choice. But simply I don't fucking care. On the screen right now, you see this chart, and it's a shit ton of numbers, but I'm gonna walk you through it. I've got from my understanding and from what the NBA community's kind of told me on TikTok and in my comment section and stuff like that, I've got Jaylen Brown, Christian Wood, Jeremy Grant, Julius Randle, and Colin Sexton, the 5 guys who are kind of the main contenders right now to win Most Improved Player of the Year, and I've got Nikola Jokic here, just kind of, he's, spoiler alert, he's who I think should win it. And so, yeah, that's across the top. And on the side, you see here, I got points per game, assists per game, rebounds per game, free throw percentage, effective field goal percentage, 3-point percentage, and field goal percentage, as well as minutes per game down by the bottom. I left a little bit of gap between minutes per game and the rest of the stats, and you'll see why. But yeah, basically what I've done is you see under Nikola Jokic, you see 7.5, and then in brackets third, and that's 7.5 points per game. And out of all these guys, you see Jeremy Grant, he's got 11.6 points per game. So I put him first there because his points per game has improved the most from last year to this year. All right, so that's the difference from last year to this year. He's improved by 11.6 points per game. That's the highest amongst these 6. Okay, so Grant's first in that category. Christian Wood's improved by 8.9 points per game, so he's second. Jokic, he's improved by 7.5 points per game, so he's in third, so on and so forth. I did this for every single category. So you got a free throw percentage, effective field goal percentage. Jokic has improved by 4.6%, which is first. And then you look at some of the other guys. Jeremy Grant, he's gone down by 4%, so he's sixth. And then what I did to figure out who's kind of had the most improved sort of season, like if you take all these stats and combine them together, is I added up each player's ranking. So let's take Nikola Jokic. So he was third in points per game. So that's 3 plus 3 because he's third in assists per game. He's third in rebounds per game. So that's 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 1 plus 2 plus 1. If you continue going down the chart, I add all those numbers up to get 16. And of course, the lower your number is, or the lower your score is, the more you've improved according to this chart. And again, this is just simple stats, but it's kind of a representation of who's improved the most using some of the major stats in the NBA. So you see above each player's name is their score. So Jaylen Brown, he's got 27. Wood scored 28. Jeremy Grant, 24. Julius Randle, 19. Colin Sexton, 32. According to these stats, and according to this kind of chart that I threw together, and by the way, going into this, I wasn't trying to create the narrative that Jokic should be the MVP. I just took the most improved player. I just took some of the stats that I felt were most important, at least offensively. I didn't take in points or rebounds per game, steals per game, or blocks per game, because those stats are very misleading. I think that just because you have a lot of steals doesn't mean that you're a good defensive player. Just because you have a lot of blocks doesn't immediately mean that you're an amazing defensive player. I think those stats are a little bit misleading. But yeah, according to this, Nikola Jokic, he's got the lowest score, which means out of these major stats, he's improved the most. And Julius Randle after that, Jeremy Grant after that. But all this is saying, and I understand that's kind of confusing, and if you sort of skip through that part because you don't fucking care, I completely understand. But I'm a big Nikola Jokic fan. It's probably because I have him in fantasy. But this man, we haven't quite grasped how good of a season Jokic is having offensively. He's having one of the greatest seasons a big man's ever had offensively in history. And the thing is that in my books, he's a leading candidate for most improved player. He really is. He's up there with Julius Randle, with Jeremy Grant, with Christian Wood, with Jaylen Brown, with Colin Sexton. The narrative might not agree with that. But when you look at these numbers that I've broken down, and you look at the way this guy's playing and how the offense revolves around this man and how he's really taken his scoring, especially to the next level. He's more efficient than he was a year ago. Much more efficient than he was a year ago. He scores more. He rebounds more. He passes more than he did a year ago, than he has his entire career. He's simply ridiculous. And this year he's going to go down as the greatest passing big man of all time. And I had to get my 2 cents in about Nikola Jokic, about the most improved player of the year award so far, because honestly, I think it's been, I'm not going to say a landslide, but it's been really, really interesting to see how Nikola Jokic has been balling out so far this year. Yeah. That's the MVP. That's the most improved player of the year award race so far for me. Draymond Green is one of the most respected players in the NBA by other people, by other players. Not the most liked player by the fans, and he has kicked Steven Adams in the nuts before, called LeBron a bitch in the NBA Finals, and he's received his fair share of suspensions because of that. I think now he's become extremely more popular because of that rant he had about a week ago. And I understand it's kind of old news by now, but just to kind of summarize, Draymond Green said it's a players' league and players are getting disrespected he thinks players are getting disrespected for wanting to leave teams and for wanting to get trades and stuff like that, which I agree with. By now, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. But I would like to quickly say that I know that I'm hard on LeBron, and I know that I don't like LeBron James. I don't really like him that much at all. And people realize that, and they think I just hate the guy. But there are some things about LeBron I do like. There might not be a lot. I might not like the fact that he flops and some of the political shit he has, mainly about China. But I'm not gonna talk about that. There are a lot of big things I love about LeBron James, and one of which is I kind of do. Maybe it's not I love, but I have a love-hate relationship with LeBron James, with LeBron's choice to leave Cleveland and go to the Miami Heat back in 2010. When LeBron did that, he created a big shift in the NBA, I think. And though at the time, everyone hated him for that, and they called him just terrible names. And in my books and in a lot of people's books, that really hurt his GOAT conversation, that hurt his chances of becoming the greatest player of all time, because he took the easy way out, as it said. Okay, now whether you're a big LeBron fan or not, you have to admit he took the easier way out. Even if I'm not trying to insult him, that's what he did. That's just what I don't see how you can do. He did that. That was easier to win in Miami than it was in Cleveland. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay. I'm sure that a lot of people in his situation would have done the same thing, okay? But the thing that did, and I think it really started when the Boston Celtics brought their big four together, to beat the Lakers and win the NBA championship in 2008, and LeBron James did it in 2010, and he's continued to kind of preach the fact that this is a players' league. The players should do what they want to do, and Kevin Durant. When Kevin Durant did that in 2016, in summer 2016, that was the seismic shift that shifted it all. LeBron James and Kevin Durant received a lot of hate for their decision to move teams because they're the two biggest players in the world. I mean, they're the two greatest players of the decade. Unless I'm forgetting, no, they are. But the fact that they did that has changed the NBA in so many ways. You see, like last offseason or a few off seasons ago, players now have all the power, or they have a lot more power than they've had in years past. They can leave whenever they want. We've seen players force their trades. We've seen players say, you know what? No, I'm gonna go make a super team. I'm gonna go chase a championship. And despite Kevin Durant and LeBron getting a lot of criticism for being the firsts to do that back in 2010, back in 2016, and I hated him for doing that. I was like, I couldn't forgive Kevin Durant for doing that. I was like, LeBron, you're taking the easy way out. But when you look at it today, you have to sit down and respect the fact that by them doing that, they've given a lot of the power back in the NBA to the players, and you have to respect that. And I think that, for all the criticisms that LeBron James gets, for all the criticisms that Kevin Durant gets about taking the easy way out, I'm going to have to sit here 10 years after LeBron James did that, or 11 years, 5 years after Kevin Durant went to Golden State. I have to sit here with an open mind and say, you know what? It might not have been good for the league at the moment. At the time, it might have hurt the NBA for a little bit. But in hindsight, I think it's helped the NBA. I think it's made the NBA a more entertaining league. It's made the NBA a more unpredictable league. It's made the NBA a more fun league to watch. When Kevin Durant went to Golden State, it ruined the league for 4 years. When LeBron went to Miami, you could argue it ruined the league for 4 years. But in hindsight, it has allowed it has allowed anybody in free agency to say, you know what, I want a championship. Let's team up. Let's go make this big two. Let's go make this big three. Yo, Kawhi Leonard and Paul George calling each other up. Let's go form this team. Let's go form this team with the Clippers. Anthony Davis going out to the Lakers. That was in free agency, but he kind of forced his way out. Same sort of thing. LeBron and Kevin Durant gave the power to the players, and I've got all the respect in the world for those two players for doing that, even though at the time it might have seemed like it could have hurt the league. But yeah, shout out Draymond Green for speaking out about that. That's risky, and I don't know if he's received a fine yet or anything like that, but I hope he doesn't. Anyway, let's talk about Jamal Murray. Let's talk about Jamal Murray's big game last night. He had a huge game. 50 points on 84% field goal percentage with no free throws. I'm going to quickly touch on this and then touch on the Utah Jazz. But yeah, Jamal Murray, 50 points, 84% from the field, no free throw attempts. We're never going to see a game like that ever again. That's it. We've seen it. We've seen the first and only game where you score 50 on 80+% from the field and no free throw attempts. That's a very specific stat, but I mean, it's just no way it can happen again. There's no way. I mean, that efficient without even an attempt? God damn. The only other guard to score 50 points on 80% field goal percentage are Michael Jordan, Kyrie Irving, a guy named Dana Barros who played through the 90s. He was an All-Star in 95, I think it was. He played on the Celtics in the late 90s. And now Jamal Murray. Those are the only guards to score 50 points while shooting over 80% from the field. Now, those guys obviously shot free throws, and they didn't shoot quite 84% from the field. I like how it says the only guards, because we all know if you included centers in that, Will Chamberlain would just be fucking everywhere. But Jamal Murray, a huge game for that. And I think we're starting to see we've been seeing flashes of Jamal Murray's brilliance. We've been seeing flashes in the bubble, Jamal Murray just going crazy. We've seen that throughout the years. Jamal Murray just has a game where he snaps and just drops 45, drops 50, drops a 30 piece on just ridiculous field goal percentage. We've seen Jamal Murray just take games over. And honestly, for me, I've seen this, and I've been ready to call this man a star. I've been ready to call this man a top 20 player in the NBA. Perhaps it's a bit premature, but I think that it's coming. And once he gets a bit more consistent, it's GG for the league. I think the future this is Jamal Murray's league. This is Zion's league. This is Luka's league. This is Donovan Mitchell's league. This is Jason Tatum's league. The future runs through these guys. Jamal Murray will be one of these top 10, top 5 players in the NBA in 5 to 6 years. He truly will be. And I see that. They call him Maple Jordan. As a fellow Canadian, I got nothing but love for my guy Jamal Murray. That's all I had to say there about Jamal Murray. And finally, before we wrap things up, I need to talk about this comparison between the Utah Jazz of 2019, 2020, or 2020, 2021, and the Atlanta Hawks back when they had Al Horford, back when they had Jeff Teague and those guys, back when they were winning 60 games a year and get fucked by LeBron James in the Eastern Conference Finals. I have to talk about this because this comparison is it's not the same thing. It is not the same thing at all. Let me just pull up that team. Yeah, so 2014-15, the Atlanta Hawks made the Eastern Conference Finals. They won 50 games and then got just destroyed by LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, the Utah Jazz are way better than the Atlanta Hawks were that year. Way better. First of all, yeah, the Hawks won 60 games and they made the Eastern Conference Finals. Back then, the East was even worse than it was today. Like back then, it was ridiculous. Years like 2015, like 2016 are the reason why the AllStar game is no longer East versus West. All right, just for some context there. The NBA didn't just decide, oh, let's do team captains just for fun. No, it was because the games are just like, there are the league's best players on the West, and then there's like LeBron James and Carmelo Anthony on the East. And like Dwayne. It was night and day around that sort of 2014 to 2016 sort of era. That was the era the Atlanta Hawks won 60 games in the East and made the Eastern Conference Finals. Again, the Eastern Conference Finals, we've seen some pretty shaky teams in the Eastern Conference Finals. They were led by Paul Millsap, Al Horford, and Jeff Teague. And DeMar Carroll, Kyle Korver was still shooting great. Dennis Schroeder was a bit younger, 21 years old. Okay, now that starting five, this is not anywhere close to as good as the Utah Jazz starting five. First of all, Donovan Mitchell. The Atlanta Hawks never had a Donovan Mitchell. They never had a guy as clutch as Donovan Mitchell. They never had a guy as electric as Donovan Mitchell. They never had a guy who could shoot like Mitchell, who could score like Mitchell, who could raise the roofs of stadiums like Donovan Mitchell. This man can take over basketball games. The Hawks never had that. Kyle Korver could catch heat. And, okay, they definitely did have a guy who could shoot like Donovan Mitchell. But Kyle Korver, he could definitely catch heat. He was about 30. He was 33 years old back then. It wasn't the same Kyle Korver who was, it's not obviously not prime Kyle Korver, but he was a good shooter. He could catch heat, but not like Donovan Mitchell could. Jeff Teague was a nice player back then. That was probably prime Jeff Teague. Donovan Mitchell is far and away better than all these guys. It's not even close. It's always been a stars league, and Utah have by far the biggest star in Donovan Mitchell. Next, the Atlanta Hawks never had a Rudy Gobert. Their big men were Paul Millsap and Al Horford, who are like power forwards. Rudy Gobert, as much as you want to hate on him, as much as you want to disrespect him, as much as you want to, make fun of him, as much as you want to shit on him, as much as whatever it is. I understand Rudy Gobert gets a lot of hate, but there is no way that anybody on this Atlanta Hawks team was as good as or was as valuable and impacted the game as much as Rudy Gobert did or does this year. Paul Millsap, he's nowhere near the defensive player that Rudy Gobert is. None of these guys could rebound the ball like Gobert, could defend the rim like Rudy Gobert, who could make an impact on the basketball court like Rudy Gobert could. None of them. The Utah Jazz are a far better shooting team than these guys. The Utah Jazz play more They play better defense. They're much more they're better coached. I think Quinn Snyder, coach of the year easily. They have a better bench than these guys. They've got better shooters than these guys. The Utah Jazz literally have they're better in every aspect of the game than the Atlanta Hawks were in 2014-15. They just truly are. Now, if the Jazz lose in the second round, or if they lose in the third round, they're not going to get swept. If a fully healthy Utah Jazz team plays in the playoffs, they could go up against the Lakers, the fucking Nets, the fucking whatever team you want. The Jazz, if they're losing a series, whenever it may be, first, second, third, fourth round, if the Jazz are losing in the playoffs, it's a 6 or 7 game series. This team is not getting swept. They're going to go up against the Lakers probably at one point, or the Clippers at one point, or a team like the Suns or the Blazers, a really good team like that, or shit, they might even make the NBA Finals and have to go up against that 3-headed monster in Brooklyn. But they're not going to crash out of the playoffs. This team, they are going to grind out a series. They can grind out games, and they're going to grind out a series, and there's no way that you can prevent this team from catching heat at least once and just blowing you out of the water at least once in a series. This is what this team does. The Utah Jazz this year are far and away better than the Atlanta Hawks were back in 2014-15. If you want to make a comparison to the Atlanta Hawks in 2014-15, it should be to the current day Philadelphia 76ers. I mean, if anything, it should be them, because the 76ers are leading the NBA. They're in the Eastern Conference, and I just don't trust them the same way that I trust Utah Jazz. Anyway, that's it. Episode 16 of the Off the Dome podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've made it all the way to the end, thank you very much. I appreciate you. Kanye, Mike Dean, taking it to church one time.